Sveiki visi, susirinkę į Limą praktinį webinarą. Turėsime pirmąją jo dalį. Su jumis sveikinuosi aš, Alvydė Palimaitė, Lietuvos marketingo asociacijos direktorė. Ir dar, kur renkasi likusieji klausytis seminaro, noriu tai labai trumpai priminti ir dar kartą visus pakviesti į metų marketingo šventę, didžiausią marketingo konferenciją Limadei Lietuva, kuri vyks jau lapkričio 30 dieną Litexpo Vilniuje ir internetu. Turime išskirtinę temą ne komforto zona ir kviečiame vieną dieną su visa komanda išeiti iš tos nekomforto zonos, paskelbti nacionalinę marketingo nedarbo dieną ir kartu komfortabiliai praleisti salėje su visa marketingo bendruomenė, pasiklausyti daugiau negu 14 verslo marketingo ekspertų įžvalgų. Turėsime net 3 užsieniečius, tai ir žinoma pačius geriausius Lietuvoje. Tai kas be ko laukia išsilgtas networkingas, daug kitų Lima staigmenų. Taigi nekantraujame pamatyti jūs. Šią savaitę brangsta bilietai, tai nepamirškite registruotis ir dalyvauti. Daugiau informacijos apie Limadei Lietuva, limadei.lt puslapyje. O aš nekantrauju pradėti mūsų renginį. Taigi, šiandieną pradėsime pirmąją iš 2 dalių mokymų, intriguojančių pavadinimo tyrimų išgyvenimo gidas. Iš tikrųjų, su Synthesis Consulting grupės ekspertais. Tai iš tikrųjų, kad visi turbūt susidurėme ir sutinkame, kad tyrimai yra gyvybiškai svarbūs tinkamų strateginių sprendimų priėmimams, tik vis dar maža dalis komandų surandame laiko ir resursų juos atlikti, o iš tų, kurie tuos tyrimus atliekame, dar mažesnė dalis tinkamai juos apdorojame, pritaikome ir išties susigrąžiname savo investuotą biudžetą ir paverčiam tyrimus tą investiciją, kurios ir norime. Paverčiam tyrimus tą jėgą ir stiprumu įmonės strategijos. Taigi, mūsų šis seminarų ciklas yra skirtas tiems, kurie nori vykdyti tyrimus ir įtvirtinti tyrimų kultūrą savo įmonėse, nepaisant biudžeto, žinių, laiko ar tyrimų pritaikymo ar kitų barjerų. Ir turėsime net 2 dalis. Šiandien pradėsime nuo pradžių. Šias 2 valandas skirsime aiškintis, kodėl tyrimai yra svarbus ir nuo ko bei kaip pradėti, norint atlikti tyrimą. Ir noriu pakviesti į virtualią sceną mūsų šios dienos lektorius. Tai pradėsime ir pristatysiu pirmiausia Synthesis Consulting Group tyrimų vadovę Eleną Sinkevičiūtę. Elenos kasdienėse darbuose telpa viskas nuo klientų naujose rinkose poreikio analizės iki prekybos centrų išdėstymo, kuris palengvintų klientų apsipirkimo kelionę tyrimų. Elena yra sociologija, rinkų ir klientų tyrinėtoja, viešosios politikos vystytoja. Hello, Elena. Taip pat noriu pristatyti Martin Aubel. Jis yra duomenų projektų vadovas Synthesis Consulting Group įmonėje. Ir Martinas verčia duomenis į verslo įžvalgas, kurios leidžia startuoliams ir technologijų, logistikos, telekomunikacijų bei bankininkystės bendrovėms priimti strategiškai svarbius sprendimus. Taip. Tai labas, hello Martin. Ir paskutinė mūsų Limos bendruomenės pamėgta ir visada labai įdomu ir naudinga klausyti jos įžvalgų, tai pristatau Synthesis Consulting Group strategę Gailę Andriuškevičiūtę. Gailė kuria prekės, produkto, verslo strategijas verslams tiek Lietuvoje, tiek tarptautinės rinkose. Ir pati atėjusi iš tradicinio valdymo konsultacijų su finansų bei verslo specializacija, pati dirbusi tiek prie viešojo sektoriaus projektų, tiek prie tarptautinių verslų plėtros planų. Šiuo metu daugiausia konsultuoja technologijų, žinoma, visus didžiausius startuolius Lietuvoje, jeigu galiu išduoti paslaptį. Taip pat B2B ir finansų sektoriaus tarptautinės bei Baltijos šalių organizacijas. Sveika, Gailė. Kadangi turime Martiną, vieną iš pranešėjų, ne lietuvį, ir turime svečių, ne klausytojų, ne lietuvių, tai yra tarptautinis seminaras, tai nuo šiol mūsų renginys persikels į anglų kalbą. Kviečiame užduoti klausimus viso renginio metu. Jūs patogumui galite užduoti tiek lietuvių, tiek anglų kalbomis. Ir Synthesis Consulting Group ekspertai juos atsakys arba vystant temą, arba po visos dalies renginio pabaigoje. Taigi, būkite drąsūs, lauskite ir viskas bus atsakyta. So, I'm turning to English. Hello, guys. It's amazing to see you. We have a huge group of guys who likes and wants to know about researchers more. And I just want to say hello for our foreign friends and listeners. And I just want to remind you that you are welcome to write the questions for the speakers anytime in chat bottom. So hello and have a great event. So stage is yours.
Thank you. So hi everyone. So if we actually have foreigners as viewers, so you probably didn't get who we are. So a bit of a very, very short intro. We are Synthesis Consulting Group. Me, myself, I'm a strategist, not a researcher. And I think my role here today is to give you a bit of different perspective and maybe challenge you a bit that not everything is about research, or how you're not alone in this, and how additional factors are important. So I'll give you a brief intro into a bit of different perspective, and then I'll give a floor to my colleagues who are actually research experts, and we try to onboard you to this journey and to research specifics and how you can do it, how, you know, all the tricks and angles you have to know in different situations, different part of this journey. So you'll have 2 sessions with them, and they will walk you through every detail. So I think we'll switch to sharing our screens, and then please, it's actually, now it's fair to say that since we are not seeing their faces, I think we got used to getting back to live presentations and live content. So please be engaged in a chat so we can actually get your pulse and know what actually interests you. So I'm sharing my screen. As Alvida already mentioned, we have this Reach Survival Guide as a name for our keynotes and for our training. And why the survival? Why such a interesting and it's quite dramatic name? So it's because we understand that very often researcher is quite isolated. Researcher in many companies in Lithuania probably works alone and not necessarily have a huge team. And even if you know, they have colleagues and you actually have a team, it's not necessarily that you're very involved all the time with to all the other team activities, and that might be challenging. So we try to make it extreme and actually, you know, imagine what if you're actually alone in a team? What if you have to cover all the requests to find something out, to validate something, to test, to discover, and so on. So we were thinking how to give you a lot of knowledge so you can actually be fit and equipped to handle all the requests and find out or validate all the answers. And we're thinking that, we were putting this together and then thinking about the scenario that what if you actually do everything like we shared with you and told you, use the tools that we gave you, but still at the end, what you find out and then you run this research, it's not actually that impactful, it maybe is not that actionable. And what we realize, what's missing, that usually when we do any research for our clients internally, it's never just research. We always work in team with, researchers working in a team with strategists, and we always get much broader perspective of, what are the assumptions, what are business assumptions, what are the contextual information, and all of that. So I'll give you a bit of more encouragement to actually prepare for research and do that without using research. So the research, when you're in a team of one, can go badly, but not necessarily because you were the one in the team. And what usually happens is that you get some kind of ad hoc question, someone needs to make a decision, they cannot make it, and then very natural, very often answer is that we need to research this, or we need to validate this, we need to ask our clients, and so on. But when it happens, someone just comes, we need to make this decision, and then we need to research this specific topic. And I'll tell you a bit later why it's not necessarily a good case to right away do that. And what happens very often as an outcome of this is that when we get this answer, we had a research goal, we had research question, we got the answer, but it's not actually enough, and sort of we still cannot make this decision because we don't have enough context. We cannot contextualize these insights that we got from our research, and then as a consequence, we cannot make it actionable. So we usually make decisions, we make business decisions in order to find out, what to do or how to do things. But then at the end we did it, we made research. The research can be correctly done, but we still cannot make a decision. And why that happens? Because if we visualize this, we have a lot of unknowns and only one known. And it's still, if we need to make business decision, we need to move further, it's still usually not enough. And usually if we actually invested in research, or even you did it internally, you spend a lot of time, it took time, everyone is expecting fireworks and everyone is expecting that now we'll come, we'll review this and we'll know what to do. But usually if we just got that answer that they asked us for, it's still not enough. And what we actually need context around it. So to understand, what were the initial hypotheses, what were the ideas we based these on, why we came up to this, what we are planning to do next, what are the alternatives, what are the context, and so on. And these are valuable from two perspectives. One, that if we find out those before we actually run research, maybe research is not even needed. Or if it's needed, we can make it more targeted. We actually know what we need to find out or validate or test. And we don't need to, either just take very narrow questions that not necessarily will give us the answer, or we have actually things to validate, and we already have hypotheses or assumptions, and we don't need to research a very broad topic. So why we encourage you to look at this and to think about this whenever you're doing your research is because, building research context is free. We don't need to use external help. We don't need to invest or purchase anything. We don't even, need to do some kind of or design some kind of very in-depth process, but we can simply find out things that is our company knowledge or is very easily accessible resources. So it can be anything from customer support to just checking digital marketing data or SEO data. It can be us picking up a phone and actually making 1 or 2 secret shopper calls, and then can give us a lot of contextual information, contextual data, or even switch our research a bit on what we are trying to find out, what we'll be validating or testing. So for example, even talking to customer support, we can understand what are the low points of our journey that we should focus on if we want to improve something. So then we don't need maybe to go in depth with the whole journey, but we can already grasp some of things, or if everything is well, we can switch to other things. We can even get from customer support what are the missing features that are demanded, that are needed from our customers, because usually customer support gets a lot of requests or asking, where's that button, or how can I do that or that. So usually those people that are on daily basis talking all the time to our clients, we actually are the great source for answers or for context why currently, for example, we cannot reach some of the goals that business is trying to reach. And of course, informational needs that what people don't know, what we're always asking. If we're, if we have a goal to improve our customer experience, for example, that's very valuable and very easily accessible data. And what we mean, you would say that if we are talking to them in some kind of research and so on, we don't need this to, to be precise. We don't need this to be very accurate. We just need to understand what potentially might be the issues, what potentially might be hypotheses that, that we can validate, what potentially be the source, of pain points and so on. So we don't need it to talk to, the whole customer support team, or we can pick up a phone, talk to a couple of them and actually understand at least the source, of the potential sources that we need to validate, or we can form hypotheses to be tested. Same with sales teams. Sales teams usually knows well the best probably our clients. We can say who are our ideal clients. We can say what use cases we actually cover well. What is the decision-making structure in a company, and this is usually even harder to research and very easily to get from them. And they can also give us insight about competitive context that not necessarily we even would get from desk research. Same from digital marketing, traffic, audience profile, keywords that are searched can actually tell us what is demanded, which segments is increasing, what is working, what is not from what we have tried, how we look in competitive context, and so on. With Secret Shopper, as I mentioned, we don't have to design proper process. We don't have to take the whole market. We can actually, for example, pick up the phone if it's possible in your products or service case, try to go through our company's journey and maybe find out that if we now have a challenge or a goal to, improve, not necessarily improve, but maybe to introduce some kind of new experience features, prepare new functionalities and so on. But actually we go through that journey and figure out that we actually are lacking behind the industry standard. If we have some issues that are huge pain points for clients, maybe before we jump to finding out what additional needs could we serve for our clients, we should get back to our processes, maybe do internal audit, and only then think, or maybe even identify which of the issues that we validate, which of the issues that we found out in the Secret Shopper are actually the biggest pains for our clients, and we should prioritize of solving them. So there are many more. We can talk to our partners and get their feedback. We could look at external sources, look at the trends and so on. But, the point I'm trying to make is that this doesn't replace research, but it can actually give us a good insight of what to research or what to validate or what to actually skip, because it's not a problem, not a priority, or we can find out from other sources, and it's not necessarily to invest time and money-wise. And what's probably often the most powerful, and I'll give you even the suggestion on how to usually run this. So internal workshops, when someone is actually coming to you and dropping this line of, please find out this, or please research this, they probably will leave you at that. What is your goal and your role here is to dig deeper and find out why we need this. What are the key growth opportunities that they identified that we want to, what are the key assumptions that they based, these ideas or these opportunities on? What are business limitations? Maybe there's something that, we don't even need to research because we know we won't be able to do. Or maybe we have done something before. And it's not necessarily that we have tried something, but sometimes someone even researched it before. And maybe we can use those data or at least learn from those researches that has been conducted. So a bit of situation to put this into perspective. So often situation, we want to grow, but actually we don't know which segments do we have, which segments are we good at acquiring, which are we good at developing, and then what are potential segments to tackle and to try to acquire next. And then, we could just start, compiling segmentation research, preparing questionnaire, collecting sample. That's quite an expensive journey. That's quite difficult in some of the industries and some of the cases. But before that, we could actually collect inputs and collect context from the teams that we have internally and from the resources that we have internally. So what sales could tell us, they actually could tell us what is our ideal client profile now, what we are good at acquiring, what use cases do we cover, and what also we cannot, because we, on daily basis, we talk to our clients, they usually have better relationship with them. Clients even tend to tell them, what do they think or how we are different from competitors. And they even get information and learn something from missed cases, from sales that were not completed, for lost cases. Then they know that, we lost it because we haven't, we don't cover certain use cases. That's use case that is quite popular. We don't have functionality. That's why we are losing certain segment. So we can already collect a lot of hypotheses and information, and also prioritize what we already know, and we're pretty confident about that, and what we are missing or we need to validate. Maybe we're always losing certain segment, but we are not sure why, and maybe it's an easy fix. Also, we can look at digital marketing and SEO data and look what are segments potential that we haven't acquired yet, who are searching for certain keywords that are relevant to us, which keywords are actually getting more popular in which regions. So we can get a lot of information regarding what's potentially could be our adjacent segments, what could be segments that we will try to acquire. Same from industry insights, even looking at our competitors, we can get a lot of information on, where might be new business opportunities, where might be segments that we haven't yet considered or tried acquiring. But if, we at some point see that the whole industry or big as our competitors are switching to that segment, we should validate maybe there's something that we haven't covered. Maybe there is still pain points or need that we could solve, and then take that part of segments from them. And then the final and probably most important part is, whoever is thinking that, we should strengthen certain segments, or, we should launch something or develop something in order to acquire new ones, it's better to break that down into assumptions, to understand limitations, to discuss, how confident we are about certain things and how risky they are. And later on, I'll walk you through the framework on how to do that, because that can actually very much narrow down your research and also make it easier to solve. If you're involved them before that, it actually makes it easier afterwards to present them the insights, to show why we validated something in a certain way, if they actually participated in breaking down what we have to validate and what we have to test. And the point that I was heading to is that, to start with the research, you don't have to start with the research, because we don't need a very specific or very even methodological process in order to get this context, to get these assumptions, and to get more inputs and more perspective than designing our research. And how we can do that? You should actually always do it and try to build up habits, so we don't always need ad hoc once we need the research to gather those insights and getting this perspective. it should become a common practice in organization, engaging internal stakeholders quite early, that if we will be doing something, we could gather the insights. And it could be insights, even ideas. If different departments are working on what we want to introduce, develop, for example, next year, then we need to gather those ideas and also test, what we need to figure out in order to know if those ideas are working for us. Feedback collection as well, always from customer support, from sales teams. It's very valuable because it can make it's easy to validate those assumptions. It's much harder to discover all those pain points, all those issues, all those uncovered needs, and so on. So if we gather those, and we usually have plenty of them, we can design our research much more targeted to finding out and validating what we need. And assumption mapping and prioritization as well, because usually if you just don't talk to them, if you just gather information, it might be that there are much more priorities than they actually can deliver on. So then we need mechanics and sort of tools how to prioritize what we actually need to find out. Because usually if we talk to teams who don't have to do research, we'll say, oh, so we need that, we need to check those insights, we need to understand that, but our goal is to actually narrow it down so we can do it even if we are alone, and we can then give them actionable insights rather just a general overview that doesn't get them anywhere. And set up knowledge depositories. So if we manage to introduce in the company, for example, rituals of retrospective, so sales, once in quarter report what are the key insights, what we found out about the clients, if our ideal client profile changed, or do we have more information now about them? Did they find out new discoveries, new opportunities that the clients mentioned to them? So we can make it into practice on documenting those things, or at least sharing it with others. So that's a great success, because then once we need to use that, we can use it as a context. Same with customer support. If we once in a while can collect information from them, that's a great success. Once we need to validate something, to put into perspective, to give a little bit of context. And what I mentioned as a framework before is assumption mapping. And I think if you ever been working with us or been to any of our presentation, we very often use this, because very often in our process, and I think in your case, someone is coming to you and say, I have this idea, we need to validate this, but that's usually quite a difficult task, because my colleagues will tell you later on all the wrong ways on how people ask questions and then don't actually get any value from research. But that's also would be the case the case here if we didn't break it down in assumptions. So if someone is coming to you and saying we have this idea, or we are planning of launching new feature or new product, then never let them go. Actually give them homework, or have a short workshop with them by breaking down it into assumptions. So what assumptions these ideas are based on? Why do you think it's a good idea for us? Why, what has to be actually true? What has to stand true in order for this to be working for us, to be a good idea? And that, that usually covers both internal and external perspectives. So what must be true about our clients, what must be true about ourselves, about the use cases, about even our competitors, that this would actually be a good idea, turns out to be a good idea. And then we can even make it easier to us and narrow down to validate these assumptions by actually trusting our experience and all the team inputs and what we have done so far. And we can prioritize it by evaluating where we have high confidence or low confidence, and where we think it's risky or not. So if we actually have high confidence that this assumption is true, And it's actually not that big of a risk. We probably don't need to invest into validating it, and we can use those resources for other matters. But if we have the ones that are highly risky, and what we mean by high risk here is that if actually this assumption ended up being wrong, we were actually we perceived it wrongly, so then at the end it would break everything. It would be a deal breaker. This idea of ours wouldn't work for us, and so on. So if we do this exercise of actually prioritizing them by only taking the one and validating the ones that are low confidence, we're actually not sure about this, if that's true, and then it's high risk, we can actually narrow down our research and what we have to validate at the end. And what is the measure of success in this case? How to find out if we actually got enough context, if we did our homework well. So two things should be different in how your research works. One, at the beginning, pre-research, if we actually got this contextual information, if we collected different inputs from different teams, if we researched a bit more, if we even questioned and asked to break it down, the ideas that we need to validate, we should have more narrow area what to research. We should have pre-validated hypotheses that we should test. So then we have clear assumption and business needs. It's not that we generally sort of go in the dark and try to give them answer that we need when we don't really understand what answers do we need to make a decision. We have clear research goal. We have more narrow research scope and good understanding of who we need to research. So this actually led us to go with a smaller scope, to go with higher certainty that we will give the answer that we were asked for, and that we will be able to make a decision. And then post-research, it actually broadens our understanding. And once we have the research results, once we have the answer, we can contextualize it. We can already make it into actions because we know how it interacts and what does it mean for different areas. It's even easier to then onboard others, to actually convince them, show them what it means. And then we can also cross-reference the results because we have inputs, from different stakeholders or different contexts. So I'll give a floor to my colleagues, but my encouragement is probably to take the pressure that it's only research's role and responsibility to give information for decision making. It's also a matter of how we're able to contextualize this research, how we are able to collect inputs from different stakeholders, different resources, different even knowledge bases, and then use it for both preparation for research and then afterwards for coming back and again using those inputs to make the research more actionable, make easier decision making with the answers that we are giving back. So now I'm giving floor to my colleagues, and they will give you. Now we will turn to research purely and what you can do and how can you do it when you're alone.
So good evening everyone. So I will pick it up from here, and what happens after you actually identify that there are certain assumptions you have about ideas you created and you want to test them, you want to validate them. The rest of today and rest of next week, we will dedicate to the equipping you with the tools and skills and how to actually carry research. And validate your ideas. So the goals of our sessions is to identify the reasons when and what type of research you do need, to choose adequate methodology to actually research and answer the questions you have, to choose adequate data analysis methods and tools, so you could actually analyze and come up with actionable insights and how to actually apply those insights in the end of the day. A second. Can you? Yes. So today we talk about how we organize and plan the research project, and next week we will talk about an analysis and act. So today what is important for us is to understand what types of market research we actually have and what is in our shed of tools, what kind of methods we could actually use. We want to also figure out how to get the best return of investment when you decide that you're gonna invest in a research project. Next, we want to also figure out what can you do alone and when you actually need help and of your colleagues or research agencies. What is realistic, how to realistically evaluate the budget and set the budget, how to do more with less, and how to frame the problems and ask the right questions. So let's start with what type of research there is. And when we actually talk about market research, we usually have a very broad term in mind, which under itself has a very different types of researches. We could fit everything from organizational development research, where we want to improve our organizations and itself, but also mostly we focus about our external, how our external world can impact us and how we can improve our business. So I'm sure this slide is not news for nobody. It's a natural cycle of your product or your brand development, and for the different stages of your product or brand development, the different type of research actually makes bigger sense than for others. So let's try to go into kind of 4 main clusters I have identified, which is definitely not extensive list and can be separated a little bit differently, but just to kind of put it into the practice better. So first big bulk of types of research we do is the customer research. It's basically any type of research which we conduct to better define our audience. What is the audience? What are the segments of our customers? What are their needs? What are their motivations? What are the behaviors? So we want to figure out who they are and who could be our potential customers. So we're talking about really demographic information and also about where do they work? What do they like? What are their values? What do they appreciate? Do they have any? Is there any religious beliefs which could have impact on are they not our customers? We also want to know what do our customers need. So customer research allows us to kind of go deeper, understand the needs. Both. Does our solution actually addresses the needs of our customers or potential customers, but also what are the other solutions customers uses to figure out the problem and actually address it. The other thing what we try to figure out with customer research is why and how our customers use this product. So what do they like about the product? What motivates them to use our product? What motivates them to use our competition product? How often they use? So we want to have a lot of knowledge of daily uses. Usually when we talk about customer research, one of these 5 or also another extent could be another extensive list of kind of synonyms and keywords are being used, which are actually referring to customer research. That's usually customer segmentation, personas, customer needs research, motivational driver analysis, behavior driver analysis, product trials. Research like that goes under the customer research. Customer research makes usually sense to do in a development stage of your product, of your brand, where you try to figure out how and validate the idea. When you're actually growing and your brand and your product is growing, and also when you reach a maturity level and you want to keep on performing and making your customers happy. Market assessment is type of research where it's mostly like most desk type research, what we can do in market research, where we not necessarily need to actually go and find the customers and ask their questions. We could do that as well, but also it's covered a lot by the desk research, where we try to figure out demand of our product, what is the market saturation, and what kind of pricing we can offer. So we want to understand how big is the market, how many competitors there are, what do they do, how do they sell, for how much they sell, how do they deliver, who are the competitors, are they bigger than us, are they smaller than us, and how much we can actually benefit from. For how much we can actually sell the product. What is the price sensitivity in that country? Are there any legislative, maybe taxation benefits, or exactly challenges in the opposite, which could make it more complicated for us to enter the market and start successfully working there. This type of research usually is done in kind of early stages of development and introduction, stages of your product, where we entering new markets, or do we want to expand into the new markets. And it could be something like a competitor research and price sensitivity research. Another big bucket is brand research. This type of research is dedicated to understand how our customers see our brand. By doing this research, we want to understand our brand's image, and we want to increase the value of our brand, of our product. So what is important for us and what type of questions we can answer with this type of research is, does our customer know us? So do they know us better than our competition, or is it vice versa? What they actually do know about us? Are we being clear and are we being understood for the values we stand, for the problems we solve, for our communication messages we send? What is our penetration in the market? So what is our market share? And not just, by revenue, but also market share by people association and people loyalty and advocacy for our brand. How much of customers are willing to pay? This also allows us to kind of incentivize how important our brand as a brand itself is, and how much we can charge our customers on top of the service just for them to enjoy using our brand in particular. In this case, we usually do the types of research called brand awareness, brand perception, brand health, brand tracking, where it's basically us versus whoever else is our competition in the market. This type of research usually comes later in the stage, when we talk about product growth and maturity of our product, when we are already established in the market, and when we do have a competition. The fourth big part of the customer research, and one if you don't do, I really much suggest to start pitching in your organizations, is voice of a customer satisfaction research. This type of research is dedicated mostly to gather the feedback of your customers. From that feedback, we want to determine on how our customers feels about us, but also how we could do better to satisfy our customers. So it's very important for us to figure out how do we do? Does our customer like our product? Does our customer like our customer support? What they like? What are the high points and low points in our customer journey? What we should stop doing? What is absolutely no? What motivates us, our existing customers, to choose our competition? And actually what we do very well and what we should continue and do better and strengthen and maybe increase our customer loyalty and our customer overall spending with us. So here we usually have types of research like customer satisfaction, CSAT, NPS, or a customer effort score. There are many others. And this type of research we start fairly early with it. We can start it with introduction, because that and continue throughout this entire brand life cycle, product life cycle, because it keeps on continuous basis giving us feedback. That also allows our customers to highlight the errors we have and gives us an opportunity to quickly fix them. So if we look at the entire brand cycle, the further you are in a life cycle, the more types of research actually make sense for you to keep on doing on a regular basis. From development to maturity, the list is just getting older, and we're hoping that we never reach the decline. We keep on doing, especially voice of customer and market assessment, again, on our maturity levels, so we could introduce something new, something exciting, and we could be, on the way of growth and maturity. Hopefully, we never reach a decline, and then in decline, if you're a big brand who has a lot of products, you can also obviously use the opportunity to kind of learn from mistakes, but possibility on making actions on a proper timeline, which would still allow us to go back to the growth and maturity levels, would probably be less likely. Okay, so we know types of research. We have many options. We can do brand research. We can do customer research. But how do I actually squeeze everything what is possible from the research? In this case, I think that it's most important to actually define what we want to know. So when we go to that internal stakeholder meetings and we make assumptions, we very much need to figure out which of these questions are the most important we want to know. If we have idea of new product launch, what is the most important? Do we want to know what type of new solution our customer needs? Maybe we want to figure out which part of our customers, or which part of our potential new customers could use us, how much they want to spend or how much they want to use, how they will be using, or maybe is why. Defining on the question and prioritizing which of the questions you want to in the end have an answer is very important, because different questions require absolutely different methods on how we can answer them. I'm sure from back in university days, majority of you kind of remembers on the differences on qualitative and quantitative research, but they do have a very a huge theoretical difference in terms of what types of answers they can answer. Qualitative research gives you hows and whys. It helps you to actually create the hypotheses and theories, which then you can validate and test in quantitative research. Qualitative research helps you to understand the reasons and behaviors and attitudes behind the actions, and it generates always verbal data, while quantitative, when we already kind of assessed what our ideas, we went to the field, we talked with our customers, we gathered their feedback, we created hypotheses, or even talked with our co-workers and our other teams and kind of created our hypotheses. Then we can quantify them and see how much of our general population, our customer base, could actually agree with certain ideas of ours. Quantitative research gives you what's, who's, and how much, kind of very quantitative and very indicative results, but qualitative gives you explanations of what is happening, why is it happening, how is it happening. Also qualitative and quantitative, when we figure out what do we want to know, it gives you a different spectrum of tools which you can use and gather the data. Qualitative research It's usually about observations or interviews or focus groups and content analysis, where we talk with real people, with real users of our products, with the real humans, and ask them questions and try to understand their behaviors. Observations, it could be anything from, standing in a retail shop and looking how actually people are choosing a type of pasta and how do they prioritize and why they decide to choose my brand versus competitor's brand. We can then stop them and ask them a question. Why did you choose my pasta instead of this pasta? We can also invite them into focus groups, which are basically a group interview with several people. What we can also do, we can do content analysis. A lot of data is already available and provided by our customers. So we could do content analysis of our feedback, product reviews, our competitor product reviews to kind of understand what type of, for example, product qualities the particular customer value. Quantitative methods and quantitative research usually is about surveys. The market standard is to run a survey, but your customers, the general population, to kind of figure out and quantify ideas. I'm sure all of you have filled one in your life. It's easy to understand. We can also actually have quantitative observations. For example, track how people not just choose pasta in a grocery store, but we can also quantify actions, what they do before they actually make a decision, how they use the retail shop environment, how they interact with it. So we could actually make improvements for the for example, the retail store itself, so it could be easier for them to choose a particular brand. Secondary data analysis, it could be anything from purchasing data sets, which are available about certain markets, or we just kind of reuse what we have and collected previously and kind of go deeper. And we can also do experiments like taste tests or blind, blind tasting mostly. And data. Data in general is the most expensive thing in entire research. We will go into detail a little bit more on how much, but data is something, it's hard to get, and we want to value it as much as possible, but there are several ways of actually getting it. So primary data is clear. If you, and usually, especially if we're talking about product launches, your brand research, this type of data does not exist. You have questions, you have hypotheses, which are sensitive for you, which nobody knows, which is not market standard. Your competition doesn't want to, share information about the same customer base. So that's something you need to collect and make yourself. But there's also a lot of secondary data opportunities which can help you both in the early stage of identifying, do you actually need the research to kind of go there? But also once you identify that you need research, it's always useful to go and try to Google if you can find this already available data. It could be reports. There are a lot of agencies who are, their one and only job is to provide the data and sell the data sets. It could be anything about shopping behaviors, to favorite colors, to value research in certain markets. And those data sets available, they can vary from in the different price ranges, and that would solve you a lot of data collection issues. There's also open source databases. So for example, institutional data, Eurostat, international organizations like World Economic Forum or United Nations makes a lot of data available, and they collect a lot of data, which is publicly available. You can download it, you can analyze it and use. They have a few types of free data, which I'm quite confident all of you already have, is your customers' feedback on your social media, on your website or your marketplace, depending if you have, I don't know, Etsy and Amazon store page, where you already have your customer inputs. The other thing, it could be product reviews, what your customers are feedbacking in your website, and also your social media content, what people are saying under your post, what they're saying in your Google or your rekvisita.lt feedback, what type of comments they leave. That's also data which you can use for research to answer certain questions. But how to get that data, and where does actually the tricky and complicated part comes, is about collecting a correct sample. We don't need to ask every single person in the world to understand how does the general population think about one and another thing. We want to be, it's impossible and necessary. We need to ask a small amount of people to actually have very certain results. A good sample is representative sample, and representative sample allows us to multiply and generalize our knowledge about a very tiny group of people into entire general populations. How do we do that? So most importantly, there we start with understanding what is our population. So for example, let's say you are already established product, you are a streaming provider, and you want to open up into podcast network. You're considering maybe getting into the podcast game. So you want to figure out what is your general population, what could be demographics of your general population, why it is important, because we want to define how does the normal podcast user looks, what is the age, what is the income potentially, what good products additionally use, what sources they use. Then we decide that, okay, and we want to decide how comfortable we are with the error of margin. In statistical research, we usually have this error of margin as a number, which gives us the confidence in our results we gather. So it's for every absolutely type of research. I don't care, is it a political turnout statistics, or public opinion on election results, or is a scientific research paper, there's always either 3 or 5% margin of error, which means when in the end of the project, when we say that 40% of our customers enjoys our website, is actually something in between 37 and 43, or in other case 35 and 45% of our customers enjoy our website. So we define how certain we want to be with our results. Then, as scientists and all the simple practitioners, we go online, we find a sample calculation tool, because it's a boring math to do it yourself, and you figure out amount of people you actually need to survey. And then you need to build the quotas. That's why in the first step, it's really important to kind of identify if there's any demographics information which is really important for your population. So for example, for the podcast users, probably it's both men and women are listening podcasts, and there's not a different differences in between how many women and how many men. So you want to kind of then ensure that 50-50 of your respondents are actually around 50 and 50 are men and women, and other genders as well. Maybe it's not that much about income. Podcast is not a luxury item, so it can be both, people coming from different income backgrounds, or maybe education is not that important, but maybe what is really important is access to internet. So, people need to have a mobile phone, that they need to have a laptop, and some other nuances which would qualify those people from not being your users, like people who don't have internet. knowing proportions and how we can actually make a sample and make it represent. What does that actually mean in reality? So for quantitative research, when we actually talk about the people, the standard for market research is, I would say, is 5% confidence level. At 3% confidence level is something which is aimed for scientific research, social sciences. We don't need to be that scientifically correct in this stage, so we can be comfortable with 5% confidence, especially knowing that usually budgets are limited. So 380 is actually enough of Lithuanians to represent an entire country, as long as we ensure that there's both men and women, and not just people from Vilnius and Kaunas, but also from regions and coming from different income groups. 380 is good enough to represent entire population. For the customer segmentation analysis, for example, for research, when we want to kind of cut data into smaller samples based on gender, based on product use, based on, I don't know, their values, we really need to increase the sample, ideal at least 500, because the less than 500, and knowing that there's usually at least 4 or 5 segments, we end up with too small samples to actually make any proper calculations. We will talk about more details like how to do that next time in a week. But it's important to know that if you are thinking about segmentation analysis, about your customer segmentation, or in general population segmentation, we need to increase the sample size. If we're talking about your customer research, as much as we can. Your customers are 100% representative of your customers because they are already. So as much as possible, we can have. It really depends on how many customers you have. So if you're, for example, business and you work with B2B only, and you have like, I don't know, 45 big B2Bs you work constantly, you sell constantly to, and maybe 15 smaller, obviously you're not going to have 500 to be able to segment. It's impossible. That's that much you don't have. But then maybe at least 60% of your small sample would be very much needed to recruit for the survey. When we talk about qualitative research, and that's always a little bit more tricky, because it's a content, it's a text, it's a people's opinion, and how can you be sure that you talk with all the people who have different opinions? So in social sciences, when we are making more of a scientific research, we say that the rule of thumb is that you're done when you reach a theoretical fulfillment, which means that once the information you're receiving is starting to repeat itself and you no longer gather new inputs, you're done. You kind of collected the entire scope of what is there to collect. But in numbers, it's kind of at least 12. And then you proceed, unless you're like a sample in general is very small. In real life, in business life, in market research, we say at least 6. What we mean, it also really depends on the general population. So for example, if you work with your B2B only brand, you have 2 types of customers. You have very big one, wholesalers, and then you work with a very tiny, micro retail shops. Maybe just asking 2 per group is enough, unless you want to kind of prioritize one and another, but it really depends on type of customers you have, type of already identified segments you are. Or it could be, if you're actually interested in on customers in different markets. So for example, you want to know how does the Lithuanians, Estonians, and Latvians feels about your whatever certain product, then you probably want to do at least 2 per every country. The more, the better. But also we kind of don't need maybe 12. We are not writing our thesis. For focus groups, the general rule is at least 3 for 6 to 8 respondents. So to kind of have enough inputs. So once again, sample in real life, just to be, because that's tricky, and that could be very stressful to actually determine the sample. And it's one of the most complicated parts of a statistical research, actually, is just to kind of get to. So for example, once again, you want to launch a new delivery service in a country, and you want to figure out, is there a market need for your new solution? And you want to understand what the B2B, the retail stores, the wholesalers would choose your delivery, and also what the customers actually need that solution, and you want to determine the price sensitivity. So what's important to have in mind is talking about a population, that you probably have two types of population. You have e-commerces and retail shops, and you also have end customers. You go to Department of Statistics, and this type of statistics is very easy to Google, and majority of statistics is very easy to Google or just assume. So for total wholesale and retail stores, it's one of those almost very easy to Google. You have almost 35,000 sellers in a country, according to the last quarter data. So you know in total potential 35,000 users of your services. And there's, according to statistics, there's 83% of all Lithuanians have purchased something online in 2019. Obviously, not all of them use the delivery services. Somebody came to pick up, but probably the majority of them, we could be fairly confident that at least 60% of those people actually use the delivery service one way or another. Gender doesn't matter. Both men and both women shop online, maybe women a little bit more, but it's not going to be that significant of a difference. And as a delivery company, you don't maybe necessarily care about the gender of your customer. Religion won't have an impact. Education maybe not have an impact. So if you take away all the underage people, you probably end up about 1 million potential B2B customers a year, B2C customers a year. You go online, you go to the tool, and you calculate your confidence levels. Here, with the sample size is always tricky. Starting at probably 15,000, basically the sample size does not change if you want to have a 3% or even a 5% representativity. The changes are very similar. What makes them a good sample or not sample is how much you actually took photos into consideration when you recruited your panelist respondents. So obviously, if you're doing research on entire European Union population, the sample size for 3% confidence would be 1,036 people. Same 1,036 people are for Lithuania. But then if you would do that for European Union, you would need to put quotas to represent the different countries, ages, languages, genders, and stuff like that. So you could have a mini tiny European Union population into 1,036. The bigger the general population, the more complicated it gets. And if you, and my always suggestion stands, and we're gonna talk a little bit that later, that if you really need a general population, what is called national representative research, go and hire a research agency, and not like a very statistical driven research agency, because that's very complicated. For 380 of your customers, you can deal with that yourself. So few more notes on the sample, because it's complicated, but let's be realistic. Life is life, and business needs to move fast, and we need to have results. Be optimistic and be realistic. 90% representative data is still better than no data at all. You can still do a lot with that data and use outcomes. You're not gonna be making the life or death decisions on it. And if you are, then go and hire the agency to do a national representative survey for you. People are tired of surveys. People don't like to participate. It's no longer a second week of COVID when nobody had anything else to do than better than actually fill the survey of a grocery delivery store. You need to incentivize participation and make it attractive for users. So incentivize it with vouchers, discounts. That goes for both your already existing customers and general population. If you're doing it, if you're buying the data collection services, usually you don't need to think about that because the panel surveys, they incentivize themselves, so you don't have to think about it anymore. But especially if you collect data on your own, incentivize. Hard task, try to figure out how you can incentivize the participation in research for B2B. Again, the same. General population surveys are very hard to conduct, very hard to ensure the quotas. If you really need that, go for agency, find a budget and do it correctly, because your social media followers, your customers, your friends, your family is not representative of entire population for the reasons because they already know you, who you are. By who, I mean the brand or your product. And they are not going to be very objective about the reality. Also, your customer base is not representative of your general population, but is 100% representative of your existing customers. So if you want to know anything about your product, your customers are the ones the ones where you get the best information from. As I said, B2B is very tricky. If you work with B2B, inviting them to fill their research, to participate in interviews is complicated. And you really need to figure out how to incentivize. And a good tip, what usually works is including your, for example, customer support or sales agents into recruiting for research. Doing that through the personal relationships, not just by general newsletter, which could work for your existing B2C customers. So we went through the entire process of trying to, assume the ideas, and I did the desk research. I know I do need the research. There's a certain amount of information which I need to generate myself. So what do I do if I'm alone? So to understand better of what you can do on your own and what you can actually do together with your maybe coworkers or for only tiny periods with the research agency. I want to kind of go not too much into detail, but kind of step by step through the research steps. What does it take to actually carry out a successful research project? So definition stage, we already touched about that a lot, and we're going to talk next week about in practice, how do you define the research problem? But in general, it's basically identifying your need. What is the problem you want to research? What you don't know, basically. Your problem is lack of knowledge in certain area. And identifying that you have a research need and what type of research need. When you decide you decided to proceeding further, you start decide a methodology, you choose a method, you define the sample as we just talked, you develop a questionnaire. It doesn't matter, is it a qualitative or quantitative, you still need a questionnaire, even if that's, for example, an observation. Maybe you don't need a questionnaire as itself, but you need a observation kind of notes, a structure, what you want to measure and track and notice. And then you maybe, if that's actually a questionnaire, you might need a translation. If you want to research customers in Czechia and you're Lithuanian, it would be very smart to translate it to Czech, because obviously not all the people speak English, or not all the Czech population speak Russian, for example, or whatever other language. So you need a translation services and maybe proofreading. You also need to program a questionnaire. By program, I don't not necessarily mean like a fancy code, but like putting that to Google Forms, which also takes time. Then you do the data collection. You reach out to respondents. So you, send a newsletter, make a social media post, buy a Google ad. I don't care the way you recruit, the way you decide to recruit your respondents. And you also need to incentivize them. So if you have offered, for example, a voucher code for your eShop, you still need to send a follow-up email with the actual voucher code, which again takes your time or someone else's time. Then data collection was successful. You got the data. The fun, the real data fun begins, and you need to clean up the data to remove all these lines, which, fake responses, bot responses, for example. Some missing data you need to code. Coding is something we do for qualitative inputs. So, for example, if we collect the customer feedback where, we ask, what we could better, and we just kind of code repetitive answers. So, how many people talk something about improving our customer support, or maybe our packaging should be more sustainable, or maybe our website is not responsive on certain web browser, stuff like that. Then we actually do the calculations. If that's needed to be done, we calculate percentages and frequencies, and it could be correlations and whatever we can do. We will talk about that more in detail also next week, how actually to analyze the data. And we also need to then take the data, take those findings, take those frequencies and percentages, and actually try making sense out of that. So what does it mean for us if we are, a future, we want to expand to podcast market, and we see that, 85% of entire population already uses podcast service. What does that mean for us? Does that mean that we don't need to educate the market anymore, or does that mean that actually it's gonna be impossible to penetrate into that particular market because market is all overfilled? And then we do the reporting. We do, in the end of the day, we kind of work hard, play hard. So that's a play hard part where we actually present. We format and visualize our findings, and then present and pick it up from there and try to apply into real life in your to serve your businesses. So who can help you in these? Because that's an extensive list of tasks, and it can be a little bit overwhelming for one person to do, especially if you're not even a research person. You are a head of marketing specialist, or you're a product manager, and there's a lot of you have your day job as well to do on top. There could be certain teams in your company which could help you. For definition, involve all the stakeholders, invite marketing, invite product team, R&D team if you have it, maybe your sales, not just maybe your sales especially, to kind of brainstorm and define a problem and kind of really be mindful of what you want to do. Because the definition stage, even if you have all the budget in the world, this is something you have to do on yourself. Even if you hire a research agency, they will definitely guide you and support you to kind of clarifying, your goals and problems. But the needed identification comes from your own resources, from your own people. So that's a step where you need to focus energy. But a research design, depending on your structure, but you might have business analytics team. You might have someone doing you're just basic data, Google ads, doing the Google AdWords work, who kind of knows a little bit more about how does the research work. R&D team could be Google. Google is an amazing tool. All of us come back to Google to look for support. It gives you it can really much support you. There's also a research agency, and for example, it's very absolutely possible to purchase only research design services from research agencies, where they can create your methodology, create your questionnaire, create you find you the best suiting method and just kind of leave you that with that. Especially that could be absolutely perfectly enough if you do your voice of customer research, where you don't need to reach out, you don't need to collect on existing data. You know the people, you have their email addresses, and you can do that on your own. You have access to Google Forms. All of us have. You don't need a research agency for that. So you can hire just for that. Knowing that it's a tricky part, maybe that's a good investment. Data collection, marketing team, customer support team could be your outreach, people who can help you to outreach and find your customers. Here, by research agency, I also mean buying data. So, for example, if you decide to have representative research of a new population, your potential customers, it's very, very complicated to find to collect a representative data on your own, while the research agencies has thousands and thousands of people in their databases, which are already incentivized and can respond to your survey. So you can also buy only data collection, come with your own questionnaire, come with your already made methodology, and just pay for data. Business analytics team, again, Google or agency can definitely help you with data analysis. Your IT department definitely has someone who was fairly good at statistics in their university, and definitely could maybe support you as well. Business analytics, marketing, design team can really help you to visualize the data and make it more attractive, and even maybe make a branded report, which you could share with and kind of wave in the faces of your competition, be like, yay, look what we did. So how much does it cost? So let's start with, what should you have in mind if you decide to do it on your own? Message is simple: don't overthink, and don't overkill. You don't need special fancy tools because you're not a research agency. We do need that. You don't need that. You can definitely find it's more simple, more affordable, or even for free solutions to kind of carry out the research projects. So as I mentioned, definition, it's on your cost. It will always be your cost. You can always pay extra for additional consultancy for me and Martin to help you identify that, but that's still on 80% of the work. It's always will be on you. For the research design, sample size calculators are free. You go online, you Google, and that's it. You can easily Google methodologies, methods. Translation, strong recommendation, always invest in translation and don't lose, don't get lost in translation, as they say. If you're really making an investment, your time investment, because it's also a big investment into, figuring out why you're on your customers coming, from France, translate a questionnaire to French. Use the professional services, or maybe you have internal resources. Use internal resources, but translate. Survey tools, for 90% of your needs, you can use free tools. You don't need to invest in Survey Monkeys, Typeforms, other fancy tools. Just use Google Forms, use Office Forms. All of us have one or another Office system package. Use that. It does the job. It even calculates basic frequencies and basic descriptive statistics for you. Done. Don't spend money there. Data collection. So yes, if you in the end you decide that you want to try to kind of reach out to general population, you might want to think about Google ads or social media ads, how to promote your survey, even if maybe you're doing that for your own customers and you choosing your social media channels as the way you want to gather inputs. Use for incentivization, the practice and then kind of market standard is that it's usually something 10 to 20% discount. It could be, or maybe it's €10 voucher for a survey response. It really depends on how expensive is your product. Obviously, if your product is 5,000, you're not going to offer 20% off. You may be going to offer €50 off. But kind of market standard for like commodities, clothing, makeup, travel 10 to 20% could be absolutely fine. Or use for qualitative interviews, for example, then usually the incentivization is higher because it's actually like an hour plus travel time of person to one and another place. Usually it's something to 20, 50 euro gift card per respondent. Data sets can be everything from zero, if we are talking about open source data, to thousands of dollars and euros, depending on what type of data you need. If you're really gonna do a lot of interviews, and consider scheduling tools, consider professional Zoom account, but also a way to save money, especially on customer incentivization. If you're, for example, doing voice of a customer research, do that post-transaction. So, you know, as example in our chat was about, you know, online ticket sale. So you sold a ticket, you sent immediately the CSAT or MPS, I don't know which one you're doing here, together with the ticket. So it's easy and you don't need, you know, double investment, and person is most likely to respond. For analysis, you do not need any statistical data equipment as long as you have Excel. The worst case scenario, Google Sheets. I mean, obviously Martin is not going to agree with me because he's the data lead and he uses different tools, but like for a general purpose, for the 96% of the cases and the questions you have, Excel is fine. There's so many YouTube tutorials on how to calculate stuff. They're like everything from, university professors to like very random people in their mother's basement can teach you so much on how to use Excel. For content analysis, there are tools like MaxQDA, but if you're just having, 6 interviews, you don't want to invest in like transcription tool. Doesn't make sense unless you're going to do that, every week. Fancy data visualization tools for reporting are not needed. Excel, PowerPoint again. Don't waste some money there. Focus on the other things. If we're actually talking about outsourcing research, so kind of I'll try to go, what is quickly, what is a market standard? As I said, definition, it's still on you. Research design, everything really depends on the complexity. If you want to do like extensive financial market review of, I don't know, five years, that's going to be super pricey, and it's definitely not going to be 300 euros. But if you just want to have a voice of customer process set up for you, it could be, as simple and cheap as few hundred euros. You pay it once, you continue using, that's done for you. Translations really depends. For the panel, how much does the survey cost? It really depends on the sample. What is the actual cost, and what determines how expensive your data is the length of questionnaire. So how many minutes a person will take to respond all the answers. How complicated it is to find those people. So for example, if you're just, you just want a general view of Lithuanian people, and every Lithuanian is good for your sample, it's going to be very easy to collect it. It's not going to be pricey. But if you're really interested only into PhDs in IT sciences, I don't know, technological sciences, it's going to be it's much more complicated to find that particular group of people, and that's going to impact the overall price of your data. So the more generic group, the cheaper it gets, the more complicated, the more expensive it gets. I would say for 300 people research in most of European countries, 1,500, I would say, is a safe bet to say how that 10-minute questionnaire, which is fairly average length questionnaire, fairly informative, is around 1,500. It can be like less, it could be 900 in Romania and 2,000 in France, but like on average, if you would research every single country, I think on average, it would be around 1,500. For the qualitative, it's usually a market standard here in Lithuania is around 200 euro for interview. Could be less, could be more, depending on the length and also how complicated it is to find a sample, and around 400 for the focus groups. Data analysis, it depends, but it can be, in a range. It depends on how long and how much. Same for qualitative reporting. Also can be as high as it goes, depending is it branded or not. But I would say you can easily find something in a range in between 700 to 3,000 for kind of standard, not crazy out of proportion length and depth report and analysis. So how to do more with less, and it's going to be the last part for today, and then we're going to see each other in a week. And that's your last 10 minutes to come up with the questions, and we will pick it up later. So how to actually do more. So we know it costs time, money, it's going to delay certain decision-making processes of how to do more with less. You make this investment decision. How do we squeeze it? So as we said, and we talked in the beginning, and just reiteration and repeating, same again, prioritize. You really need to make a distinction in what you want to know and what you need to know. It's very easy. It's very often when we work with clients, we see that, okay, so the initial idea was to segment the customers based on the frequency, how they use the product, what are the attitudes. But then at a certain stage, the questionnaire is becoming, Christmas tree of death, when we try to put all the possible, but we also want to know what are their favorite colors, and we also want to know what are their favorite brands, and we also want to know this and that, which actually is not going to contribute anything to what we said we want to know. And the longer the questionnaire is, it becomes more expensive to collect the data, especially if we're paying for data. But also it tires the respondents, and people are no longer that concentrated to giving you actual true results. So prioritize and really define what you need to know for the decision you want to make. The other thing is make sure you have you will have a way to answer into why questions. What we see and what is is becoming kind of normal, that okay, for a really long time, and especially probably in the beginning of your product, the natural question is how much we can scale, how much we can do this, how many people are buying, how much they're spending, but very quickly into the process, and especially when sales starts to drop or there's some bump on the road, we try to understand why. And actually the whys, the questions whys, they usually gives us most of the explanation. What do we actually need to do to be able to involve how muches and all the who's and why's and stuff. So either you decide that you don't want to know the why, and for you at that particular moment, it's really important to know how much and how frequently, what is happening, and then it's absolutely fine. But ideally, you want to also be able to answer the why questions. And yes, I said that why research comes with a qualitative research, but there are ways where we can manipulate data and think one step ahead and try to answer into whys with our qualitative questionnaires. A simple example, if you are doing NPS research, so you're asking your customers how likely that you will recommend our services to your family or friend, please ask one more question and ask them which of the following services you experience with us. If you have a bigger portfolio, just simple knowledge of that, okay, my customer bought from me a cupcake, coffee, and also used our, free Wi-Fi in our cafe, is already going to provide you information to compare the groups of how people who purchase only cupcake and how people who purchase only coffee differ from one another, and how their satisfaction, how their loyalty to our brand is differing. That will allow you already to make further hypothesis to try to understand, okay, so something is not working with our coffee because the customers who had only cupcake, they actually like us more, and the people who also bought the coffee, they no longer, they rather probably choose our competition. Just simple additional question or open question already gives you opportunity to raise study hypothesis and kind of have ideas on why things happen. Also, if you make budgetary investment and you decide to pay data and buy data, it is cheaper to buy one 18-minute long survey than a 9-minute panel survey. This rule does not work if you're doing this, if you're doing your customer research, because your customers will drop from your survey. But people who are actually participating in panels, they get paid for participating in panels. So they are motivated they will stay and they will answer. They might get tired, but it's cheaper. It might get, expensive and heavy on budget at the first time. But if you want to, if you will end up in a situation where you need to repeat the general population research again in 6 months and ask then another half a question, it's going to be more expensive than just doing it in one sitting. Also, create a habit to collect the data. So as the feedback after completing every transaction you have with the client, collect written insights, collect their feedback, even if you don't have time to use it then. It does not hurt you to leave the open question after MPS or CSAT, what should we improve? It's very normal that you don't have time to actually go through every single feedback and kind of try to analyze it. Maybe you don't have that time then, but maybe you will have it in a month and already, or even in a year. That data, especially retrospective of data, it's going to be maybe even more valuable than just a single, on-time input of feedback. Use that. You will figure out the way on how to actually apply it. And the worst case scenario, you'll just, gonna lose few gigabytes on your cloud storage, and that's all the worst what can happen to you if you never use that data. And no, it's not a 10-minute break. That will be a time we picking up the questions. So I will try to move it. No, I cannot move it to the other screen, but I think you can see it in your own screen in the back. So first question from Gerda, which is in Lithuanian, so I'll quickly translate if anyone does not speak. So the problem is that I assume that some sort of ticket selling office, you are doing your customer voice of customer research after every transaction, and you're very successful in getting the feedback from people who obviously bought it online. So it's easy to send a questionnaire for the people who you have emails of. But also a lot of people, around 40% of your customers actually are, living in face-to-face world. And it's hard to get feedback from them. So what do you do and how do you reach out? So I think in practice, there are everything from, all of us saw those tablets or random buttons where you can, collect the data for CSAT. So if, for example, if you're talking about CSAT, how satisfied you were with our service, you press the smiley face, which is from the user perspective always very weird because you're doing that in front of the customer support agent, and it's kind of becomes a little bit more personal than when you do it online and you don't see any person. But that's one of the options. The other option is that probably comes with the investment into your time, is to actually actively ask your customers who are purchasing tickets in the ticket office if they would like to, like to participate in the research, if you could collect their email address and, for example, send the same email, send the same questionnaire just by email. Check with legal if that's not how does that work in terms of GDPR and collected data. The paper handouts is the option. It's probably least efficient option. You can always just hand in people, a short questionnaire in a ticket office, but it's going to both take their customers, your customer time, and probably increase the queuing time, but also it will make additional cost for you to then type in all the responses into the whatever tool you're using for analysis. So I guess the most convenient way would be iPad with the smiley faces. And then you won't be able to collect the content, but ideal than to ask proactively your customers in office to participate in research and then send it by email. It's not going to be that easy to find them, but could help. Getting back,
one more idea, you could potentially also replace it with yearly or bi-yearly survey where you do a panel with generally your customers and your competitor customers for comparison and evaluation. So that would be costly, but you could get the insights, and especially fish the ones that only use your physical stores, not the digital channels. So that's a possibility to do that. It's costly, but then you could get a possibility to get their feedback as well and their insights.
Mm-hmm. There's also another question on getting back to customer qualitative search. The more the better. But if you do research often, often could the regular sample calculation, for example, general population, be applied? So that you don't spam your customers too often. Yes, so absolutely. So for example, what it really depends on what type of research. So for example, you on annual basis or every 6 months, you do your ginormous relationship NPS survey, where you want to kind of check the weather, check the mood with your customers. Absolutely. You have your customer base, their proportions, their gender, their age, their shopping basket, their transactions with you, combine quotas, send the request to participate for the particular customers, and just do that. What it becomes tricky if you have a lot of research, and what actually for one of our clients, it's a very big a process what we do, because there are a lot of questions. They have a lot of clients and a lot of transactional researches, so both NPS and CSAT and stuff. So the strategy is to determine what are the most important steps in customer journey we want to measure. So what is the most important straight after the purchase, maybe when the customer just got I don't care what you sell, a computer, got your computer bought from you and is trying for the first time, and what is the most valuable for us to either ask a week after, or maybe 6 months after, then potentially he or she, your client might be, already went through onboarding, potentially forgot about you, and maybe is likely to come back to your website and look for a mouse or keyboard or whatever. So it's important to, in that case, decide which steps you want to research, and then what we call it, to quarantine the customers. So what we do for that client, we try to kind of create proportions and natural sample sizes for how many customers we want to reach out after every important journey moment it happens. And after we reach out, we send them, for example, they purchase with us, we send them a CSAT to evaluate our customer support and our purchase, and then we put them in a quarantine for 6 months. That would mean in our natural, research schedule, after 3 weeks after our existing customer bought the laptop, we launched the quarterly MPS. That person won't get the email. So we're not going to be annoying the customer with frequent emails, but also we will then be able to include more of the customers. It really depends on how big of a customer base, but yeah, quote, and if you quote and quarantine your customers, if you have a small sample, prioritize which journey steps are important for you to measure. And in case we have a tool after all, do you prefer Dinata or Conjointly? Conjointly, sorry. Honestly, I don't use none of them.
Me neither.
But whatever works for you. If you have, to what we managed to quickly Google, that it's the market trend reporting tools, right? So they allow you to kind of
Research,
conduct research. Whatever works for you. I don't know what could, if that's convenient, that gives you a platform to survey, to schedule. Absolutely do that. What we can do for next time to kind of maybe go into a review process of what we see best luck for
of those two.
Yeah, of those two, but we can, and maybe some other competition, because we usually don't work with these tools. But so come back in a week, we can give you more proper response. I see no more questions. And also I see 1 minute left on the clock. So I think we are very much perfect on time.
You just proved that you not just the best in research, but the best of timing as well. Thank you very much. It's really interesting. And I just want to remind everybody that it was just first part. So we're waiting for you guys. Just next week at the same time, we'll have second part that name is Analysis and Act, and you will get the same Zoom link and everything. And I want to say a huge thank you for Cindy's Consulting Group strategist and analysis team. It's today was Gaila Andriuškevičiūtė, Martin Obel, and Elena Sinkevičiūtė. And thank you one more time, and have a great evening, and see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.